evening, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well on this night. Welcome to Children's Defense Fund Ohio's Lift Every Voice Children Fall Benefit. We are so thrilled to be here once again at the historic Lincoln Theater to celebrate the efforts of this community and our shared work of improving outcomes for children. I'm so honored once again to be able to serve here as your Master of Ceremonies for tonight's program. As an anchor for Spectrum News One and a multimedia journalist, it is certainly an opportunity that I've been able to have to get to know and understand the mission of Children's Defense Fund Ohio. And I know that your presence here this evening indicates that shared admiration and respect for the work of this organization and that are advocates for children day in and day out. This evening, we are celebrating the ongoing work of Children's Defense Fund to make Ohio a place where every child, not just one child, but every child, where they can have a place to be supported, where they can thrive, and where they can live in dignity. Specifically, we're going to center on the voices of people with experience in Ohio's foster care system, highlighting the long and somewhat winding road of advocacy that has resulted in the appointment of Ohio's first ever youth ombudsman, Jenny Stotts, who you will get a chance to meet this evening. Now, for those of you who were able to join us at the reception earlier this evening, you got a chance to experience the wonderful performance by the Columbus Youth Jazz All-Stars from the Jazz Arts Group, led by band director Derek DeCenzo. This group of young musicians included Jet Gonzalez, Jordan Steinbrook, Fiona Sullivan, Evan Phillips, and Vincent Maneri. Of course, you got a chance to hear it, but I know you know that they were outstanding on this evening. So if we can, just show our gratitude to them. You all did a wonderful job playing this evening. At this time, we'd like to give a warm welcome and a special recognition to tonight's event sponsors. These are a group of community leaders, businesses, and organizations who also believe in CDF-Ohio's mission and the importance of being a part of this movement. First, thank you to our child hero and lead sponsor, the Robert Weiler Company. Next, we want to appreciate our child champion sponsors, including Nationwide Children's Hospital Foundation, Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, Ohio Education Association, and PNC Bank. We'd also like to thank our child advocate sponsors, including Dr. Jim Weiler, Lynn Rosenthal, and Jack and Jill of America Midwestern Region. And then there's our child ally sponsors. Those are Diamonds Direct, Rob and Shannon Crane, David and Angela Doyle, Rita Saronin, the Ohio State University Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Thompson Fund, Kent Johnson and Jillian, J3 Strategy LLC, and of course Spectrum News One. And then our child mentor sponsors include the Honorable Governor Bob Taft, Ohio Federation of Teachers, John and Stacy Royer, Tracy and Israel Nahida, Scott and Amy Clubs, Dareth A. Gerlach, Equitas Health, and Mary Lazarus and family. Let's give a round of applause for all of those sponsors for their support and their sponsorship. We certainly appreciate all of you. We'd also like to acknowledge a special group of volunteers who serve on our state advisory board. Dr. Randy Lighty, who is the board chair, Amy Clubs, Craig Diaz, David Doyle, Lynn Rosenthal, Dr. Minnie Somasundaram, Governor Bob Taft, Dr. Jim Weiler, and Yolanda Zapeta. Let's thank them and acknowledge them for their leadership. We also have a number of Ohio public officials with us this evening who we want to thank for their service to our communities and to our children. Senator Stephanie Kunze, Representative Monique Smith, and Representative Dontavius Gerals. A round of applause for them too. We appreciate your work. We are here this evening to share a vision of a future in which all children get to enjoy their childhood, where they feel valued and where they feel protected. A future where they are fully supported to develop at their own pace and to reach their potential as adults. Tonight is about telling the story of how each of us can be a part of making that future a reality. The Children's Defense Fund of Ohio works to bring people together to go upstream to address systemic level barriers that children face. We'd like to talk more now about what child advocacy looks like. Behind each one of the faces that you'll see in this short video, there is a community of people who are connecting with them. They're coordinating coalitions, they're organizing a legislative children's caucus, they're training students to find their voice and to tell their stories to people in power. Together, they have a much larger impact than any individual could have on their own. Let's take a look.
You know, I think as a country, as a state, and as a community, we don't invest anywhere near as much as we should be in our children. And CDF is making sure that we start thinking in that way. It gives me hope that there's an organization like this one that has such a big heart and a grand vision, and that's what it's going to take to make sure that all children in Ohio have a wonderful and safe future.
I think it's a pleasure to really be able to cultivate information to advocate for the well-being of children and families. When we talk about utilizing data, a lot of times it's focusing on the numbers, and a lot of times there's this quote that people use that there are no stories without data and no data without stories, whether that's community voice or lived experiences for the betterment of children and families.
We make sure that we're advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves. I wanted to make sure that I could help affect change at a more entry level, a ground level, a systemic level.
We really recognize that schools themselves are a microcosm of our larger society. And so in our advocacy for education equity, we prioritize lifting up economic equity, racial equity, health equity, all in tandem with understanding that how healthy a child is, how well supported they are at home and in the community to be safe and thriving, all has an impact on how well they learn in school.
I think the child tax credit, as opposed to really any other policy that child advocacy organizations work on, may have had the biggest impact that we've seen in that it reduced childhood poverty by 30%. So it's something that we've shown works, it is working, and it's something we don't want to see go away. We want to see this expanded, and it can happen.
Child advocacy is standing up for children and being in their corner in terms of their whole child, for their education, their health, making sure that they have the nutrition that they need, and all the areas of a child's life that need somebody to advocate for them.
We expect a lot out of children. We expect them to go to school and succeed, and oftentimes they're hungry. They don't have stable housing. They don't have health care. And if we can solve some of those problems for those families, then that really gives those children an opportunity to grow and thrive.
As CDF-Ohio's only fundraiser each year, this Lift Every Voice for Children event helps raise the funds necessary to sustain the organization's ongoing efforts to be a leading force for children, especially for those who have no voice and who have no power. So tonight, we are asking you to be as generous as you can and to invest in children on tonight. We've made it easy for you to give to CDF-Ohio. You can just take the next couple of minutes if you can and text the phrase CDF-Ohio 2022 with no spaces, and you can text that to the number 243-725. You'll also find that information listed in your program tonight as well. And as an added incentive, our sponsor, Diamonds Direct, has donated a pair of diamond earrings. Does sound good, yes. Donors who give $50 or more from now until midnight tonight will be eligible to win this gift. So the person's name who is drawn will be notified by CDF-Ohio. Please give what you can to support Children's Defense Fund and their critically important work. Okay. So it is my pleasure at this particular time to introduce the Lift Every Voice for Children event co-chairs, Dr. Randy Lighty and Lynn Rosenthal. Dr. Randy Lighty serves as the chair of CDF-Ohio's advisory board as well as the executive director of the Appalachian Children's Coalition. He's the Dean Emeritus of the College of Health Sciences and Professions at Ohio University, where he developed the college's outreach and engagement with underserved populations throughout Ohio. Lynn Rosenthal is the president of the Center for Family Safety and Healing. She oversees teams that provide medical care for abused children, counseling and advocacy for survivors of domestic violence, home visiting services for at-risk moms and their babies, and well child care for children in foster care. Prior to joining the Center for Family Safety and Healing, Lynn served as the policy director for the Biden's Foundation Violence Against Women Initiative. From 2009 to 2014, Lynn served as the first ever White House advisor on violence against women. At this time, would you please welcome to the podium Dr. Randy Lighty and Lynn Rosenthal.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Tanisha, for that kind introduction. And Lynn and I have the privilege of serving as the honorary co-chairs for Children's Defense Fund Ohio's Lift Every Voice for Children event. I'd like to take a moment, too, to just thank all of our sponsors. I know they were recognized earlier, but to thank all of our sponsors, including our lead sponsor, the Robert Weiler Company, for their ongoing support. Every one of our sponsors have been just absolute champions in pulling this event together. As well, we'd also like to recognize and thank our fellow advisory board members and the CDF-Ohio staff for all their dedication and commitment to our mission. We'd also like to recognize a special guest who is joining us from the CDF National Office in Washington, D.C., Katoya Roberts, National Director of Movement Building. I'd like to thank Katoya for being here this evening and thank everyone at the National Office for their support as well. Katoya, your leadership and your presence means so much to us. This is really a time to celebrate the amazing accomplishments that have been made to advance the work of children throughout the state of Ohio. At a time when there's so much division and so much conflict, one thing is clear. For us to create a thriving and a flourishing future for all of our children, the future that they need and that they deserve, we have to come together and work as a community. I'm especially proud to serve as the chair of the CDF-Ohio Advisory Board and have the honor of working shoulder to shoulder with a group of amazingly dedicated and accomplished individuals who believe in our future and that we have a role to play in creating a brighter tomorrow for Ohio's children. You know, as a father and a grandfather, I have the unique privilege to have wonderful young people in my life every day. And I wish that all children have what they have. Working toward that vision is my reason for being a believer in the Children's Defense Fund Ohio.
Like Randy, I am thrilled to be here in support of Children's Defense Fund Ohio. I'm Lynn Rosenthal, and I'm the president of the Center for Family Safety and Healing at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And at the center, every day we see the effects of poverty, abuse, neglect, and trauma on communities, on families, and in the experience and lives of our children. The work our teams do at the center to help address the harm that's been committed is vital and important. But you and I both know that prevention is the best medicine. At the center, we're working to change social norms about abuse and violence. But it's Children's Defense Fund Ohio that is working to change the conditions in society that allow violence, poverty, and abuse to continue. Together, we're working so that families can not just survive, but thrive. And that is why I'm so proud to be a part of Children's Defense Fund Ohio. And I know that all of you are too, and it's my honor to welcome you here tonight.
Finally, both Lynn and I would like to ask again for your individual support by giving what you can this evening to help Children's Defense Fund make a difference for the lives of all Ohio children. As you've already heard, it's easy to do. Just text the phrase, right there, CDF-Ohio. Why am I saying this? You can see it all. The CDF-Ohio 2022 to the number 243725. Everything that you give will make a critical difference in the work of this organization and in the benefit we can bring to children. As you know now, and as you're going to learn more this evening, your contribution will be an incredibly worthy investment. Thank you all again for coming, and we will move on now. I'll invite Tanisha to come back out.
Randy and Lynn, thank you again so much, not only for what you have done, but for what you are doing for Ohio's children. Now, in our earlier video, you saw what we call the definition of advocacy. And now you're going to get to see the story of advocacy in action. It's the story of a successful campaign that CDF-Ohio played with a pivotal role in, along with many partners, to convey to legislative and state government leaders in Ohio why Ohio needs a youth ombudsman office. In this first of two videos, you're going to get to hear from Ohio's foster alum who are working to prevent today's foster youth from experiencing the traumas they faced in their own lives. Please join me now in listening closely to their story.
Right now, there's a child in a family who may run away to escape an abusive household, but has returned multiple times back to the family and now is occurring in juvenile record. Their story is not being heard.
I'm a former foster youth myself, and I did experience abuse both before and during foster care. But here in Ohio, the driving force behind this effort has come from youth. Ohio Youth started actively advocating for this office in 2018, but the complaints and concerns that they had date prior to that.
We found out that there had been a foster youth Bill of Rights that was actually in the Ohio Revised Code since the 1960s. However, none of us current or former foster youth knew of this Bill of Rights, and the reason for that is because none of the rights were enforceable.
I come from a unique perspective as someone who has worked behind the scenes in child welfare agencies, where I've seen caseworkers and social workers have a caseload of work to where they're not able to tend to the concern for the child who is experiencing something in the home.
They're saying, I need help, I'm being abused, and that child's being brought back to the abusive home. Caseworkers, law enforcement are believing the parents, and no one is really taking the child seriously.
When a young person runs away from an abusive situation, what is supposed to happen, according to federal law, is there's supposed to be an interview with that young person asking why they ran away. Our youth reported that this was not happening consistently, and that they would run away from abuse to try to escape, and then they would be placed back in that same abusive situation, and they said that there needed to be accountability, safeguards, some way to protect them.
The situation when you don't have an ombudsman is you don't have a place where you know you can go to where someone will take your concerns seriously and listen to you. A youth ombudsman is one who will take their concerns seriously and really do the work of making sure that they can get their complaints resolved.
It's important for me to have a youth ombudsman office because I understand firsthand the power of having someone in your corner. So many things I've faced in this life, even to this day, I do it by myself. That's a hard place to be. But when I was in care, I faced a situation where having an outside voice speak for me was very powerful for me.
In my personal experience, the event that led to my removal from my father's care was a more serious assault than normal. And on that day, I found myself with no one to call and no one to reach out to for help because I no longer trusted the current measures that were in place. So had there been a youth ombudsman, there would have been this alternative mechanism to report my concerns.
I feel that it was important for a youth ombudsman office to be established because when I was in care, both myself and a vast majority of my peers had endured some sort of abuse or violation of what was supposed to be our rights on some level. And I hate to report this, but very often the case was that these things were not addressed appropriately. And if the perpetrator of the abuse isn't forthcoming, which they usually are not, then these issues remain unaddressed and youth stay in these actively and legitimately dangerous situations because they are not being listened to.
And I don't know if you all are familiar with Ma'Khia Bryant. She is a young woman that died here. She was killed here in Columbus. And she had said, listen, I need help. This is what's going on in this home. I could have easily been in Ma'Khia Bryant's shoes. And that is what's hurtful for me, is that if she had that youth ombudsman, I wonder what impact that could have had if there could have been an intervention and she could have been here. She could have been saved.
As I listened to the advocates and leaders tell their stories, it's definitely difficult to hear, but one thing that stood out to me, there was a phrase which was the power of support in your corner. Nothing else. That definitely ought to captivate your attention. I am definitely in awe of each one of them, their courage, their strength, their passion, their ability to clearly convey what's needed for kids here in Ohio, and specifically having a youth ombudsman to protect the rights of youth in foster care. To Jermaine, Lisa, Nikki, Jay, Deanna, Juliana, Kaden, and so many others who were not able to share their stories in this video, we appreciate them. We thank them for just sharing what they have, even at the State House and with us this evening. It's super, super important. Please join us at this particular time in just showing our collective appreciation for them and sharing. I'd like to quickly remind everybody again that CDF-Ohio needs your help to continue its advocacy efforts for kids who can't vote, who can't lobby, who can't speak for themselves. So again, consider giving a gift on tonight by texting CDF-Ohio 2022 to 243725. And remember, a gift that's $50 or more will qualify you to be entered into that drawing for those diamond earrings. Again, being given by Diamonds Direct. And again, it's whatever you can give on tonight. It is now my pleasure to bring to the podium CDF-Ohio's interim director, Kim Eckhart. As interim director, Kim is carrying the torch of building a community that uses our collective voice to advocate for the whole child. Her commitment to youth and foster care started as a mentor for high school students, and now she gets to leverage that with 20 years of experience, professional experience in the public sector, to effect change on their behalf. As interim director, Kim will continue to use her voice to advocate for foster youth while working to advance the whole child approach with her colleagues. Please welcome interim director and research manager for CDF-Ohio, Kim Eckler.
Wow, this is such a special night for me. I've always wanted to have that experience where you're on a team and you win a big championship and you celebrate together, and tonight feels like that kind of experience. So we're going to focus tonight on the Youth Ombudsman campaign, which is one of just many that myself and my coworkers work on, but it does represent a concrete win, which can be rare in policy work. So the campaign for a Youth Ombudsman closed a significant gap in the lives of foster youth. But what was that gap? You heard their stories, but one thing you may not know is Ohio has had an ombudsman for elderly and nursing homes for over 3 decades. And you may have had to use that number to call to report some conditions or maltreatment in a nursing home on behalf of somebody that you love. That was not true. We've been providing those protections for our elderly for decades, but that was not the case for our young people. And they don't have necessarily a family on their side who can call for them. The Youth Ombudsman addressed that gap by creating a place for them to call. And CDF certainly cannot take all of the credit for this work. It's so important for me that I recognize the Ohio Youth Advisory Board. This is a group of students and young people ages 14 to 24 who've been in foster care. And right beside them, the entire way, is Action Ohio. They're alumni of foster care, working on behalf of current foster youth. I have never met a group of people who are so committed to justice. And as you heard, they have been gathering and organizing and coordinating and educating about a youth ombudsman since 2018. And on one significant night in 2020, a group of these young people attended an official forum. And I want you to kind of imagine this night. Okay, so young people, one by one, approached a stage and a podium not so different from this one. They were speaking to Governor DeWine's Children's Services Transformation Advisory Council. And they used their stories to describe the importance of a youth ombudsman. And their stories captivated the room. Their stories held power. And it just so happened that that was my first day working at Children's Defense Fund. Now imagine also, my first day was also the first day of an entirely new career. I had left a somewhat predictable job as a financial analyst and stepped into an unpredictable and very complex role as an advocate. And I was still a little fuzzy on exactly what my job was. But when I heard their stories, I could start to see how my role in amplifying their voices to the people that needed to hear them. And with 20 years of experience in the public sector and navigating those systems, I could help them to get to the places they need to be. So that week, CDF-Ohio joined the Youth Ombudsman campaign. And we do what we do best. We researched, we wrote articles, published issue briefs. And then we started later that year meeting with legislators to educate them about the importance of a youth ombudsman. And the campaign started to grow. We formed a coalition, and we were invited to speak at different events, the Legislative Children's Caucus. So our proposal was gaining traction. And when Governor DeWine's Transformation Council released their report, in their recommendations, they included having an ombudsman. It was like we'd reached the second half of the game and we were ahead. It was very exciting. But later, when the bill was introduced into the legislature based on those recommendations, we realized that the vision that had been laid out by the youth and alum
was not reflected in the legislation. Suddenly, it was the end of the game and we were down. The bill had named a child welfare ombudsman, and this was an appointed role that would be serving both youth and adults. And it was so clear to the youth that the office needed to be dedicated to the youth-specific needs. And this was something that this was of utmost importance. So we spurred into action. We were busy. We had dozens of meetings and hearings, letters, petitions. We brought young people to the State House to testify in front of the legislature at these hearings. And eventually, our message did get through. That youth in Ohio deserve to have their own ombudsman appointed by the governor to investigate their concerns. So we're going to look again at another video to hear a little bit more from them about how they were involved.
At CDF-Ohio is really to amplify the voices of the people with lived experience. And we wanted to make sure that the stories that they were telling, that were showing how the system was failing youth, were said in front of the people that needed to hear it to be able to make this important policy change.
Because we are so passionate about our advocacy work and particularly about the Youth Ombudsman's Office, it helped other organizations such as Children's Defense Fund and other organizations around the state get on board and help rally with us.
So once we were able to partner with Children's Defense Fund, I feel like they were really able to bring in their skills and amplify our voices in a way that allowed legislators to understand us better, and that helped us to be more effective.
So it was not just a group of children who lived in foster care that have grievances. It became a movement in Ohio, a regional, a statewide movement of people with lived experiences and organizations who want to make child welfare a better system for children.
The things that were most important to me throughout the legislation was that we keep showing up over and over and over again to stick to two major points. And those two major points again were that the office has to be just for youth. Youth will come last if youth don't have their own office, or they won't be heard at all. And then the other one was that please create an ongoing conduit so that youth can continue to have a voice. And we got both of those two things.
Every single step of the way, youth with lived experience were consulted and asked, does this make sense? Does this align with your experience? Does this align with the reality of these types of situations? And I think that it is only for that reason that this campaign has been so successful, and that we need to keep the youth's voices in this. They are the only ones who can tell us how this can work and how to make it better.
When the legislation passed to create Ohio's first youth ombudsman, we all celebrated, and we just have so much hope. It's not perfect. There's things that we still hope for and we need to build on, but it has been a joy to get to know that this is going to happen in Ohio.
It's an amazing opportunity, and I feel that for those that are coming out of foster care into foster care behind me, if they have this, I'm so hopeful to what it could mean for their experience in foster care.
I just felt relieved as well. All of the hard work, the testimonies or testimonials, and just going to the State House, speaking with people on the phone, it was like all that has finally come to this place where it's like, victory.
Just knowing that I had a part in it, that I helped to influence that, it really made me feel that I was able to take that experience that I had, that was, I had these traumatic memories, and I was able to take that memory and to kind of change what that meant to me.
I, on one hand, am glad. I'm also reserved, and I want to make sure that we maintain our eyes and be vigilant, and to make sure that we can continually improve not only the ombudsman, but our child welfare system in its entirety.
it just creates more advocacy, it creates more care, and it creates more change and a better, safer world for everybody when people are able to share these experiences. And it can be uncomfortable to talk about, and it can be uncomfortable to listen to, but shoving something under the rug does not make a problem go away. And I am just really happy that I'm able to sit here and say that there is a problem, and this is important, and we're working on it, and things are getting better and improvements are being made, and that just makes my heart happy.
So incredibly proud to have worked alongside the people who are interviewed in this video, and some of them are here tonight. I hope you had a chance to meet them. So I've had my team victory, and I really want to share that with all of them tonight. And so I will recognize tonight we're focusing on CDF's role, but this accomplishment relied on everyone playing a unique role. And it reminds me of that quote Margaret Mead says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And through your generosity, CDF is able to dedicate staff to be committed to this full time. So I invite you to continue to be generous so that we can be an independent voice for youth. So we put the text to give back up on the screen, and I hope that you will take advantage of that. So the Children's Defense Fund is committed in its very roots, in its history, to racial equity. Our founder, Mrs. Marion Wright Edelman, worked in the civil rights movement alongside Dr. Martin Luther King. And that is a legacy that I want to keep at the center of our work. A youth ombudsman is absolutely about racial equity. Consider this: in 2020, children who are Black are 3 times more likely to be in foster care in Ohio than children who are white. The youth ombudsman protects the rights of youth in foster care. Why do they need this additional layer of protection? I would say, unfortunately, it's because we are biased. We dismiss certain people's concerns. I'm as guilty of it as the next person. So when a teenager runs away, too often we see them as a troublemaker rather than believing their reports of abuse. How much more does this affect teenagers who are Black? A youth ombudsman who understands the role that racial bias plays in the child welfare system is critically important in the role of working towards racial equity. I want to be very clear that in our pursuit of racial equity, protection should always be our North Star. So we should actively recognize our own and others' biases as we work towards protecting youth. So, I now have the incredible honor of introducing Ohio's first youth ombudsman, Jenny Stotts. When we were asked, did we know anybody who might be a good fit for this role, Jenny came immediately to mind. And we asked youth, what do you think? What should the qualifications be for this role? And there was a very long list. But at the top of the list was that it had to be someone they trusted. And Jenny has many excellent qualifications. She most recently served as the executive director of the Athens court-appointed Special Advocates Program. Yet it was her demonstrated commitment to young people in foster care that earned her an excellent reputation among youth and foster alum. Tonight, she joins us as Ohio's first governor-appointed youth ombudsman. Please join me in welcoming Jenny Stotts.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, and thank you to everyone for being here. It is a professional privilege and a personal honor to serve as Ohio's first youth ombudsman. I recognize that while this office is new, and I've only been on the job for a few months, this journey has been quite long. To the advocates, to the allies, to the partners, and most importantly, to the youth who made their voices heard, I'm proud of you and I'm grateful for you. Your determination is an example for all of us. To the legislators who listened, thank you. And of course, to our administration led by Governor Mike DeWine, I'm thankful that the right people were in the right place at the right time, and we were able to make this happen. I'm happy to share with you that our office opened to the public on May 31st of this year. We currently offer youth 2 pathways to access our services, including a web-based submission form and a dedicated phone line. Yes, if you call during business hours, you will talk to a real live person who will guide you through the next steps. Now in our work, our intention is not just to manage conflict or to manage complaints, but to work towards a meaningful resolution. We hope to partner with youth and to partner with agencies to solve problems. Our team is trained to be responsive to individual youth needs while we work to resolve their concerns. Our priority, of course, is to assist the youth in front of us, but we're keen to this idea that the work that we do on behalf of individuals can have a lasting and positive impact on all youth served by Ohio's Children's Services System. But I stand before you tonight with a healthy level of disbelief, let me say. We're all, to a certain degree, the product of circumstances and timing. The decisions that we make and the actions we take influence the world around us. And in a way, if you think about it like that, each of us has the capacity to change the world. So when I think about the constellation of decisions and circumstances and timing that put me here in this moment at this time, I can't believe it. My commitment to serve Ohio's youth, and trust me, I hope I never lose my understanding of the magnitude of the work that I've been trusted to, but my commitment to serve Ohio's youth is fueled by my time as a caseworker, by my time as a forensic interviewer, as a social work educator, by my time as a CASA director, as a foster care adoptee myself, as an ally, as a sister, and as an adoptive parent. I've worn many, many hats, and I see our children's services system through many lenses. And I am certain that youth voice and youth perspective is the key to making Ohio stronger. Professionals with and without their own lived experiences must continue to listen without defense to lived expertise. Much like the spirit of advocacy that led to the ultimate creation of this office, we approach our work from the perspective that we can play a part in transforming Ohio's children's services system. We receive, review, and resolve complaints to improve service delivery and outcomes for Ohio's youth. And we imagine an Ohio where youth voices are amplified, where people are respected, and where the needs of all families are met. We can get better at what we do every single day. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you so much for trusting me with this important job. Thank you.
Jenny, again, thank you so much, and thank you for your leadership as Ohio's Youth Ombudsman. Now it is time for our panel of experts to share their thoughts on the work ahead for CDF-Ohio. First, Deanna Jones is a consultant with CDF-Ohio who provides expertise on child welfare from the perspective of a community advocate, alumni of foster care, and former caseworker for over a decade. She was integral in efforts to establish Ohio's first youth ombudsman and works to improve the child welfare system as a program specialist with evident change and a trainer with the Ohio Child Welfare Training Program. She's a published author of Life After Detour, Firsthand Advice to Empower Teen Parents. Her podcast, Life After, offers wisdom on resilience. She owns a black hair care product business and is a professional speaker, a member of Action Ohio, and above all, a mom. Next, we have Sherry Brady, Vice President of Strategy and Program, joined Children's Defense Fund at the national level in 2021. Her role builds on her work to support community power building and equity by investing in key partnerships, focused on building philanthropic field practices around community-centered grant making. She has specific interest in child welfare policy, which was a part of her portfolio at Voices for America's Children. She's also served as the Director of Policy at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Director of Policy at the National Council of Nonprofits, and Program Director at the Center for Policy Alternatives. I asked CDF-Ohio Interim Director Kim Eckhart as well. Yes, we can give her a round of applause. Jumping ahead a little bit. And yes, at this time, I want to welcome back Interim Director Kim Eckhart to rejoin us on the stage for our panel discussion.
My part, I love doing this. All right, so let's start really quickly because you mentioned earlier about the specific quote, and I want to read it word for word. Let me get to this. You said, the quote was from Margaret Mead, or by Margaret Mead. It said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." As we all kind of start to think about that and the kind of impact and the change that the world actually needs, what do you think that a group like this actually needs to do, and how can we address this issue moving forward? What's next on this particular front?
Yeah, thank you. So in my research, as we were getting more and more knowledgeable about the child welfare system, I learned that Ohio is actually at the bottom nationally in terms of outcomes for foster youth, in terms of graduation from high school and being enrolled in post-secondary schools. And I also learned that we're behind states like Texas and Mississippi when it comes to offering scholarships to students who have been in foster care. And so I've talked to a lot of college students about this, and again, their stories are so important because a friend of mine, Shalisa at Columbus State, said she's an adult learner now, but when she was in high school, she was visiting colleges and she could see herself there. She was excited. And it wasn't until she met with the financial aid advisor and she realized, I'm on my own in this world. And she didn't know how she could make it work. So thankfully, 10 years later, she is in school. But what if Ohio promised every student who had been in foster care as a teenager that they will have the support that they need from the adults in their lives to reach their highest potential? And I'm really hopeful that we can get this done. The Chancellor of the Department of Higher Ed is a supporter, and with a group of committed citizens, I think this could be the next big policy win.
Sherry, feel free to chime in on that.
I think the first thing that I'll say is that I really appreciate the emphasis that is put on scholarships for people aging out of care. When I aged out of care, I was fresh out with my GED, and I was crying in the library with my 2 kids trying to figure out how to do it. And just not having that help and not having that provision was a setback for me. So I just really appreciate that. And looking forward in terms of what we can expect, I love the fact that the Ombudsman Office is really intentional about incorporating and cultivating youth voice. We have really been involved in every stage of the process, and Thanks. I'm going to raise it a little bit above that. I think these issues are very important, but I think one of the things that as I look at from a national perspective and looking at the state of sort of where we are right now is really a call to really think about the state of democracy, right? Like we need to really build a multiracial, multi-generational, inclusive democracy that really takes into account the voices of those who are most impacted by the policies that are being passed by our leaders and policymakers. And how you do that is including the voice of those with lived experience, like the example that happened in Ohio here, and including the youth voices and sharing that power and really unlocking the power that communities hold to be able to talk about and solve the issues, because those who are closest to the pain are actually closest to the solutions. And so I really think it's important that we think about that. And the way that we think about that at CDF is really thinking about organizing and mobilizing our bases, which include the young people, include their parents and caregivers, include other folks who are really looking out for children, really investing in them to recognize their power. Part of that is getting them to think about running for offices and places too, understanding why it's important that they actually participate in our democracy as it is, and shift it so that it's not just about representatives, but it's really about being inclusive and including those people. So I think that that's really we have to look at to really think about solutions that are going to mean the most for those who are most in need.
I think that's important of what all of you have said, but even to your point about being inclusive, is it sometimes hard work? Absolutely, but it's necessary work, and work that at the end of the day, you'll be able to see the fruit of that once we do the work. I want to go to this next question. You know, as we start to think about working for justice and what that means, you know, a lot of these issues that we talk about are rooted in generations of racial oppression. They're systemic issues. And so how can we really pursue racial equity in a way that impacts young people, not just for today, but for the future?
I think that we really have to sit with the fact that the youth in care are touching systems that have built-in racial inequities. And I think that we have to really own that as a community, as a society. These are our kids. And they are facing those systems. When I came into care, I came into care as a Black girl who had touched several systems. And if you don't take account of that, you're not really holistically intervening for me, and you can't adequately advocate.
And I think, you know, Children's Defense Fund, I think has a really strategic role to play in this, because we've always taken a posture of optimism, and I think, you know, it's a scary topic, and when we use our vision casting of what could this world look like free from racism, you know, where children just get to be children. You know, we often talk about we want children to thrive into their adulthood. But can we just have kids be kids for a little while? And, you know, as soon as an adolescent, you know, reaches that stage, they're adultified. And the mistakes that they make are, you know, we don't necessarily give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that when we, you know, consider, I talked about racial bias, when we think about how that racial bias impacts the way that we treat adolescents and the mistakes that they make as their brains are developing, you know, we can really do a lot better to allow kids to be kids. And the Children's Defense Fund, I think, because we have this role of not accusing, but inspiring. You know, we can, like you're saying, take ownership together, that no one specifically, you know, has to feel like they're responsible for it, but as a community, as a whole, we are together working towards better outcomes for those kids.
Yeah, I think building on that, it's recognizing that racial inequities exist. They exist in all the systems that we're dealing with, and that these children are touching, as was mentioned here. I also think we need to discuss power and where power lies. I think power is something that people never want to talk about, right? It's like, it's the sort of the secret thing. Yes, power is not, it is finite. There's, you know, you're gonna have to give up some power in order to create change that really needs to change, and it means giving power to those with lived experience. It means giving power to these young people. It means giving power to people who are most marginalized. It also means focusing on those who are most marginalized. A lot of times we get, you know, think about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter, but if we do not focus on those who are most marginalized, we will not get to see the change that we need to see in these systems. We're really just rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic.
It's rebuilding a system that it will make the same mistakes in rebuilding that system. So I think you really have to look at the inequities and look at the issues that these systems are doing. They're actually working as they're designed. I mean, they're working designed to focus on a certain kind of folk and what that means, because it's the people who have built them. So that's why it means opening the aperture, bringing more people in, including more people who have different experiences, including people who look like me, who actually are disproportionately represented in the system, and making sure that they're at the table, because if they're not on the table, they're then on the menu, and we need to make sure they're at the table, and not in a tokenized way, but in a way that actually has agency and power.
Let's stay on that for just a moment, because when we start to think about power and what that really means, I think oftentimes, even in just the stories that I cover, kids don't often recognize, one, the power that they have. They don't recognize the voice that they have. And in some situations, it has been squelched. They've even been at a point where they kind of step back because it's like, I'm afraid to use my voice. But what is your message to community members to say, how can we help kids to find their voice? I start to think about things that have gone across through the legislature and how we start building kids from kindergarten on up. And I think that's what's coming to mind for me, is starting at that age. But what do you guys say to that in terms of helping kids to recognize their power and their voice and actually using it?
I would say leveraging your experience, leveraging the power that you do have. If you are a white person and you can leverage that experience to come alongside and do the work with me, then that's what's required. That's going to get us further. That's going to make the impact felt further, longer, deeper. I think that really not defending intent when we're talking versus impact. Sometimes the intention is not something negative or hurtful, but the impact. It's like the example I give, if I accidentally, shoot you and I go, oh, I'm so sorry. Doesn't matter. You shot me and I'm telling you that this hurts, and you can't stand there and defend, well, I didn't mean to do it. The impact is you wounded me. Yeah. So if we're really going to pursue this and we're really talking about power, we have to both leverage our experiences, and we have to make sure that we're not defending intent over impact. And it's easy to do when you feel like, oh, I don't want to mess up. You know what I mean? But we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that because it's a setback. And so if we're really going to deal with the power, that's how we do it. We leverage our experiences and we don't defend intent over impact.
And I also think it's about, we all have gatekeeping roles. We all play gatekeeping roles. What kind of gatekeeper you want to be? I think being a liberated gatekeeper, open the door and using the power that you hold to bring people alongside you. Open the door. I have a friend who's like, it's not about allyship anymore, it's really about comradeship, it's really about being a co-conspirator, really, being in, when you're in spaces, bringing people with you who are not normally in those spaces, opening those doors and making them feel welcome in those spaces. And if they're not there and you're there, asking the question as to why they're not there. So it's really about using the power that you hold to leverage and bring those spaces. And you talked about, where do we start with children? I think you put civic engagement and your civics back in school so they understand sort of the role that people have in making sure that policies get passed in a correct way, right? You don't hide that. Amazing myself at Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law is how I learned about it. It was not necessarily taught in school, but right, those kinds of things, and how we teach young people starting early about the role that they can play in the system that we exist in the democracy that is our governance. And so I think that is really important. We do a lot of that in freedom schools and CDF freedom schools. That's a part of the curriculum, and we start at age 5 and goes through high school. And I think that it's really important that kind of education happens, so they recognize their power in their community, they recognize their power in the world, and you keep that going. And it's for communities to recognize that you have a role. It's not, we talk about sometimes with children that it's just the parents, they need to come, but the community has a role in raising these children. How you want your children to survive and how you want your children to grow and thrive. Everyone wants that way, including mothers who can't afford it, poor mothers, black mothers, indigenous mothers. They all want their children also to succeed. Until we decide that every child is our child, we're not going to get there.
Well, I think it's really important to understand that kids can see through our BS. And,
I think a lot of times we see young people and we kind of like think like, why aren't they adults yet? Like, why aren't they behaving the way that I am? And it's, you know, like their brains are developing. And so, you know, when we think about how they use their voice and how they use their power, they're on YouTube and they're on TikTok and they have a way of communicating and getting their messages out there. It's just not necessarily the way we think about it. I'm like, well, can you write a letter? And I think when we start to really see young people as you know, fully, like they have a way of expression that is important and valid, and we're not measuring them against what we think that they should be. I think that can really help them to stay engaged because they know when they're being tokenized, and they can see through that.
Follow up, I don't want to wrap up. And it's important because if they don't feel that if they feel that they're being tokenized or they're not really being included, they will not engage. And you want them to engage and you want them to feel like they belong in the spaces that we're asking them to come into, and not just so that you can hear their sob story or hear how they overcame something, right? It's really about making sure that they recognize the power that they have in being in that space and are having and making a difference.
Thank you guys so much for sharing what you shared on today, and I hope that we all leave empowered and feeling like, okay, the next child that we see, the next person that we talk to, that we are willing to take that leap, take that step, to say, hey, what are you doing? How can you help? Can you come alongside me? Yeah. So let's do that.
So at this particular time, as we get ready to end this evening, we want to end with a final recognition on the big screen of our generous sponsors of this evening's event who helped to make CDF-Ohio's work possible. Now, as you've all heard all of our speakers say this evening, there is so much, again, that you can do to advocate for our kids and obviously to join the movement as well. So I'd like to invite you again to join me in contributing to this work. Your investment in CDF-Ohio is an investment in our children's futures and in our communities. So please consider your donation. Again, text to give, and you can do that by midnight for a chance to win those diamond earrings by Diamonds Direct. On behalf of Children's Defense Fund Ohio, thank you so much for joining us on this evening to lift every voice for children. We appreciate everything that you do every single day to advocate for kids. We want to make sure that you travel safely on tonight as you leave here and to your next destination. Everybody, enjoy your evening.